Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Cricket Podcast. I'm Nick, as ever, joined by Azza. How you doing, Azza?
I'm okay, Nick. I think there was a loaded element to that question, wasn't there? Because India got an absolute thrashing in that last match.
Yeah,
But I the way I'm thinking about it is it's a five-match test series. My emotions will be decided at the end of the fifth day of the fifth match.
yeah. Well, more importantly, Azza, I think the England victory aside, which is obviously making me happy. This is a big episode. We're talking about dropping players like Rishabh Pant from your fantasy 11. We're talking about potentially doing what we managed to do in this last round, which is win a fantasy uh, game or win money with just one safe team. We've got all these sort of different elements that we have to consider. So there's a lot to digest this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Quickly, last match, we said we had a bankable team and we did win money. We joined some of the competitions and we did win in those competitions. The bankable team also performed well against our own friends. It came out on top. Now, that's not to say that if you had that team in your competitions, you're going to be in the top tier, the top 10 percentile of winners, but you're always going to be coming up out on top with these bankable teams. Or I would say, more often than not, you're going to be coming out on top. And that's something to keep in mind for this episode. We bring a lot of deep analysis to our fans. You, Nick, are a lawyer. You have a lot of critical thinking skills, a lot of insight into cricket as a lifelong analyst and a fan. And I myself am a sort of self taught data scientist, and I've been applying those skills to fantasy cricket, and the results are for everyone to see, I think.
No, well done, making this sound like we're a LinkedIn page. Good job on that front.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's talk about things people care about, not our backgrounds. Let's get into some numbers. Right, number one rule when you're picking a team for fantasy cricket is whether you're picking one or 10 teams or 20 teams. You've got to know your ground. You should somewhat know the conditions. We're back in London. We're at the Oval. First piece
Yeah.
of good news, fingers crossed that it stays the same throughout, as predicted as of yesterday and even today. Shouldn't rain. Bit of cloud, bit of some sunny spells, but it shouldn't be raining.
Yep.
Um, exciting. Hopefully,
Okay. I'm not going to say anything about the weather.
let's not jinx it.
It's fairly difficult to predict.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's not jinx it.
let's not jinx it. Let's look at something really interesting though. In the last 5 years, there have been three tests at the Oval.
Yeah.
In those three tests, there have been six scores over 300 in 12 innings. So 50% of the scores have been over 300. But
Yeah.
perhaps more importantly, there's only been one score in 12 innings that's under 200.
Right.
So,
Right. So, I mean, it's infamously known as the flattest track in England, in English cricket, in Test cricket in England. So that's sort of backing up
yeah,
that
it's.
general
I think
heuristic that we know.
most matches at the Oval tend to be a bat first kind of pitch, and then generally spinners
Yeah.
can come into play on the fourth or fifth day. Just on that note, in those last three tests in the last 5 years, spin has taken seven first innings wickets across three innings,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in the second
Mm-hmm.
innings, there's been a total of 22 wickets combined for spin across three
Right.
innings. So second innings
Do you
spinners
know?
are.
Do you know what that is as a
No,
percentage of all
I'm
wickets
not a
taken?
numbers guy. I just looked at this. You know
Okay.
that's too complicated. As a viewers and listeners can go figure that out if they're so inclined. My basic point was that spin does get better a bit towards the end, and the last little point to consider when you're making your fantasy team is is having a decent spin option. I will say before we move into the real deal, which is the players and your teams to pick, is that usually the Oval is the last test of the summer in England, which
Yeah,
means
yeah, it
the
is.
pitch would have been a bit older. There'd be a lot more cricket on it. Um, so let's see if it's still going to be very spin friendly. The weather conditions have been different this summer in England, so we'll see what
Yeah,
happens. But let's we're talking about spinners. Surely it's time for come on Ash from Russia behind
come
the
on,
stumps.
Ash. Yeah, you know what? I've run the statistics, our fantasy prediction system, point system, whatever you want to call it. We'll have a name for it soon. Stay tuned. It's also saying you got to pick Ashwin, so we are picking Ashwin. So India better pick Ashwin because look, Ashwin recently played for Surrey in county cricket and he picked up a 6 for 27 at the Oval against Somerset. That's just one match, but it's Ashwin. He's the best spinner in the world at the moment
Yeah,
in
well,
Test
I mean, I
cricket.
think it's a
So
it's a
you have
no
to pick
brainer, right?
him at the Oval.
It's a no brainer with Ravi
Yeah,
Ashwin that
yeah,
you gotta pick him. Um, if he plays, you have to pick
yeah.
him. We India may not want to pick him. That is a point for the Indian think tank for Virat Kohli, Ravi Shastri, etc. to sit down and make a decision. But from a fantasy point of view, as a you have to go with Ravi Ashwin. Uh,
He's an absolute
statistically,
looking, absolutely.
he looks very good. He can give you fantasy points with the
Yep.
bat, fantasy points with the ball. There's a lot of scope to earn points with him and win money
Yep.
with Ashwin in your team. Uh,
Now look, he's only played the one match at the Oval
and
previous to this, but he's been all right. He's averaged about 24. He's picked up 3 wickets.
sure,
He picks up about 3.5 to 4 wickets per match in Test cricket. So that's up there. We would expect him to do about the same given the
yep,
conditions. And if you're looking at about 4 wickets in the match, that's a lot of fantasy points. Now it depends on how he's getting those dismissals, but it's nonetheless it's a lot of
yeah.
fantasy
So
points.
that's
Now, just add to that quickly that Ashwin can also wield the bat a bit, certainly more than the other number 8 that India might have gone with, Ishant Sharma. Ashwin does better in overseas conditions, so you would expect him to give you about 10 to 15 runs more in a match, which is again directly translates to more fantasy
yep,
points.
yeah. No, that I think that makes a lot of sense. I think um,
Yeah,
to sum it up for people who've got very short attention spans, you pick Ravi Ashwin because he's going to pick up wickets. He's a threat with the ball. He can tonk it a bit with the bat, so he might get you
yeah,
some runs. There's every reason to pick him if he's obviously in the 11. One player who's definitely going to be playing this
absolutely.
match, barring any injury on Thursday, is going to be a relatively. I want to say he's in decent form. A player named Joe Roots. That's definitely understating
Right.
it.
He's okay. I mean, he's looked
He's scored a
okay.
few. He's
Not the
scored a
best
few
form
here
of his
and there. I
life.
think
Yeah.
he is probably in the form of his career. He is
Yeah, he can knock the ball around
he's
for sure.
he's on course to break records. He is an absolute must pick for fantasy cricket at the moment. I think that's a no
Yeah, so
brainer.
let's not go into the captaincy discussion, right? But what if you're having just one team? I don't see how you can not pick Joe Root.
Yep,
He's gone up in the credits points as well, so I guess the apps have also sort of recognized that he's worth his points.
yep.
He's costing you 11 credits, but absolutely worth it.
So just on it, let's even his numbers this series have been great, and I'll let you quickly shine a light upon that in a
Yeah,
second, Azza. But his general record at the Oval is he averages 49 at the Oval. His last match against India at the Oval in 2018, he scored 125. All the signs point towards him continuing his run of form. You wouldn't bet against him scoring another century. If if you're that confident about a player
No,
scoring a century,
no.
you have to have them in your fantasy team. It's as simple as that.
Look, even if he doesn't score a century, he looks sure to get starts. And in this era of Test cricket, a batsman even getting more than 30 is not guaranteed at this point, just because of how dominant bowling has been, especially fast bowling. So, root you need to have three batsmen in a fantasy team at least, and one of them has to be Joe Root.
Yep.
In fact, he'll be your
I
first
think
pick in
he's
any
he's
team.
the first he's the first pick. I think
Yeah,
as far as the Indian captain's concerned, Virat Kohli is still not getting in. To be honest, he's not getting into either of our teams. I don't think either the bankable or the risky team. Um,
yeah.
we'll touch
So, in
upon that
fact,
later
I've gone with two risky teams, and he only gets a
He-
look in the
in
second
the
one.
second risky team. Um,
Yeah.
someone who definitely will get in for India again, I think, is KL Rahul.
Hmm.
He had a bad game last game, but I think most of the Indian batsmen did. I don't think Pujara has done enough to warrant a spot back in our fantasy 11s. Uh,
Not
but
yet. No.
Rahul fits the bill. He's done well. His scores are great. Uh, again, as far as England's concerned, Jimmy Anderson. I mean, we can dissect the numbers, but there's no point. We know that you have to pick Jimmy Anderson.
Yeah.
But we're now at the question, the question that really will define a lot of fantasy teams this week, and that is Rishabh Pant.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So this is the big one, guys. In our bankable team, we are dropping Rishabh Pant. It's going to be a bit of a shocker to a few. Pant has a good record at the Oval. He's sort of savior of the GABA. But look, he's not looked very good against the swinging ball. He's not looked good against the English bowlers, and that's probably why, as a few analysts and commentators have pointed out, he's dancing down the wicket to Jimmy Anderson first ball of any given innings, because he's not sure that he can counter the swing sitting at the back of his crease. So look, we're dropping him for that reason because even though he does get plenty of catches, about 3.7 catches a match, a lot of points, 8 points a catch, but that alone does not cut it for a fantasy side if you want to go for the bankable route. The guy needs to score more runs, and he doesn't even look close to being able to score runs at the moment. You could say Pujara, Kohli, they looked okay. They looked like a 50 or 100 is around the corner, but not for Pant at all.
He really, yeah. It's I mean, I appreciate that. Oftentimes, as I've learned through my life, that dropping my pants is usually a shocker for people around me. Um, it is
Yeah,
something to be concerned about, perhaps if you're someone who really is a punt fan. I think it's deeper rooted than just fantasy. I think it is a genuine cause for concern. Um, but
yeah,
but we'll touch upon this when we look at our risky team a bit later. He's still one of those
yeah,
X factor players, so you do have to keep him in your consideration. What we're saying to listeners is
certainly.
that if you're making one team, you're making one bankable team. You don't want to put in too much money, or you only have time to make one team in your friends' leagues. You're not picking Rishabh Pant.
So what that means actually is that you're picking Johnny Bairstow as your wicket keeper. So if you're not aware, Joss Butler will not be available for the fourth and fifth Test matches, which means Johnny is going to be handling the gloves, and he's looked all right in the second match. He found some form. So let's see. I mean, Johnny as your wicket keeper makes sense. Now look, Nick, at the beginning you said the oval is more batting friendly than any other wickets that you might find in England, and that's probably where Punt comes into your risky teams, and we'll so we're giving him a look in our second risky team
Yep,
and our first risky
yep,
team, just not in our
yep.
bankable team.
So what? Okay, that's great. You mentioned Johnny Bairstow. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna quickly on the fly add a little 20 seconds to a segment that we have not discussed before, where I'm just going to quickly think of the changes that might happen for England. It's just a couple of
Okay.
changes. I think obviously with Joss Butler being missing, I think even though Sam Billings has come in as cover, I think Johnny Bairstow keeps. I think Ollie Pope
Yeah.
probably comes in for Joss Butler to shore up the batting. I don't think Dan Lawrence
Yeah,
takes
that
that
makes sense.
spot. Uh, Ollie Pope
Hmm.
is another Surrey player, and I think Chris Wokes probably comes in for Sam Curran. Uh,
Yeah,
it's been a little while
that
since
should
Wokes has
be.
played for England, but it should be a good pick as a. Uh,
Look, Sam Curran is sort of the third backup test all rounder for England, isn't he? I am a massive Sam Curran fan, but he's just not lived up to the expectation in this series. We bigged him up so much for the first and second test matches. Just unfortunate that he's not found his form with the bat or the ball. On the other hand, Chris Wokes, I know he's coming back from an injury, but he's in our bankable team,
yep.
Nick, just because of his stats. They it's just he's getting better as a
Yeah,
cricketer as
he
time goes
was.
on.
He's in the last year, perhaps, or in the last 2 years. I can't remember when exactly, but he's England Test Cricketer of the Year. He's
Yeah,
very good in English conditions, and I must say the little bit we saw of him in the IPL earlier this year, which by the way, listeners, that's coming up soon, and there's going to be a lot of content on that front. He did really well. So I think Wokes in for Curran is probably what's going to happen in terms of changes for England. Quick 20-second prediction for any changes for India as a in terms of your prediction
Ashwin
for a
coming
team.
in for Ishant.
Okay.
Yeah, so Ashwin coming in for Ishant, that's the big one for me. I don't see Kohli making sort of knee-jerk reaction changes to the team apart from that. I think in phases through the series, every batsman has had his time, got at least a 50, so I don't see anyone else being dropped. But that's about it for me, really, Nick. They're going to go with Bumrah, Siraj, Shami, Jadeja and Ashwin. That should be the team that they go with for the bowlers, and then the batsmen and wicket keepers stay the same.
Yep. No, that sounds good. All right.
Yeah.
Team. What's our bankable team?
All right, let's go for it. So one wicket keeper, Johnny Bairstow. We've touched upon that. Three batsmen. It's the minimum that you need, and the two Indian openers and Joe Root. So Sharma, Root, and Rahul. And then we've gone for three all rounders in the form of Wokes, Ashwin, and Jadeja. And so that's two spinners from the Indian side, but no Moeen Ali. Um, Look, we have him in our risky teams, though. Uh, you just can't drop Ashwin from a bankable team. And
Yep.
then bowlers. We've gone with three English fast bowlers: Overton, Robinson, and Anderson, and then Jasprit Bumrah to round up our 11. Now, in terms of captaincy, we've again gone for Joe Root in terms of the captaincy decision. I don't see why we would pick anyone else.
Yep.
He's been by far the standout player of the series. And then the second is the vice captain is going to be Jasprit Bumrah. Now, look, the sort of points prediction system would suggest that the second highest scorer for this match should be Craig Overton.
Okay.
Now, believe it or not, I wouldn't say that we should pick him as a vice captain because having a captain and vice captain from the same team will sort of indicate that you have immense confidence in that team, right? Now, we're not writing India off from this series, not even anywhere close to it. And if India has to have any shot in the series, Jasprit Bumrah is a big cog in that
Sure. Sure.
machine.
I think we can
Now,
expect a reaction.
yeah,
We can expect a reaction. We can expect there to be a
yeah,
little bit of a fire has been reignited perhaps after it was dampened a little bit. Um,
exactly.
Jasprit Bumrah should run in. His record suggests that he doesn't usually follow one bad game with another bad game. Generally speaking, Um, so
Yeah,
so that makes sense from a vice
certainly.
captaincy point of view. My only contention would be perhaps Ollie Robinson, um,
Hmm.
but but what's that's by the by. I think captaincy 100% Joe Root. If you're making one team, it's tempting to be a little bit cute about it and pick a left field captaincy choice. That's great in the risky team, right? Which is what we've gone for
Yeah.
in one of our risky teams. And I think we're only
Yep.
going to discuss one of our risky teams, and then the viewers, listeners
Yep.
can then make of that as they will. What's our
Yep.
risky team? Our sort of one combined risky team.
So our combined risky team, and just pick and choose players from this as you will, you know. But some names that we haven't mentioned: Rory Burns. He just cost you 8.5 credits, but he's already done well in the series, well enough to be one of the higher performing batsmen in the
It's
series.
his home ground
He
as
did really
well.
well in the last match, of course. And it's his home ground. Yeah, so he's getting a look in for sure. And apart from that, we are bringing in Mohammad Siraj because he has a wicket taking ability that sort of is only second to Jasprit Bumrah
Yep.
in that Indian side. And of course, as you mentioned, Rishabh Pant also gets a look in. Now, particularly Rishabh Pant getting a look in because even if he scores, say, 30 runs in innings and he bats for 2 innings, 60 runs in the match, he's going to be scoring a lot of those runs from boundaries, and
Yep.
those are bonus points. Another set of bonus points from, of course, his catches. And so in our risky team, we've gone for two wicket keepers. So you're getting a lot of points from the catches, which we know is a big factor in
Yep.
English cricket, right? Challenging the outside edge seems to be the norm. And so we've also gone with the captaincy choice of Johnny Bairstow for the same reason, doubling your points for every catch that he takes and doubling your points for every boundary he hits. Again, Johnny Bairstow, attacking batsman,
Yep.
flat conditions, you expect him to hit a lot of boundaries.
Yep. And the vice captaincy pick's interesting because we have gone with Craig Overton. Um,
Yeah, I'm not sure you agree with that, but
I
that's what we've gone
I
with.
do. I think Craig Overton's is a good shout for a risky vice captaincy pick. Obviously, subject
Yeah,
to whether he plays or not. Um, Maybe Mark Wood comes in
yeah,
instead. I doubt it, but okay. Bottom line is really the takeaway today is if you're making one team, you're dropping punt. Realistically, it makes the most sense to drop
yeah.
punt.
You're dropping
You
points.
have him in your risky team. If you're making a bankable team, you have to captain Joe Root. If you're making a risky team, perhaps captaining someone like Johnny Bairstow is better. We expect this to be a fantasy 11 where having more batsmen um, or players who can score runs will be beneficial because it's a better batting surface. But spin and
Yeah.
wickets can come into play towards the end of the game.
Yeah. So look, finally, I just want to say, fantasy cricket has a lot of inherent biases. So, for example, I myself and I know you are we are both Delhi Capital supporters. And what happens is that we might have, if we were more driven by emotion, we would have wanted to stick with Pant for one more match, right? But what we're trying to give the listeners here is, say you're a big Rishabh Pant fan, like I am, like you are. Well, we're still dropping him, so
Yep.
just keep that in mind. Make sure to take the bold decisions if the stats are backing that up. Look, at the end of the day, you're here to win matches. You're not here to support your favorite player. Virat Kohli might be your favorite player, but he's not been getting a look in for the last two matches for good reasons, right? And that's what we're here to point out. Just might be stating the obvious to some, but I think it's important to keep that in mind. In the long term, as a fantasy player, that's how you come out on top.
Yeah. No, I think there was some sense in parts of that little monologue at the end. As a
Yeah,
No, you're right. I think your point is important. It's our signing off point. I think is don't be afraid to make a difficult decision. Uh,
yeah,
if you want to win, it's very simple. You can go with emotion, and if it pays off, That's fine. But take a risk,
Yeah.
be bold, and that's how you win money in fantasy cricket. That's how you beat your friends in fantasy cricket.
Right. And are you trying to show me how to do a monologue?
Yeah, no, no, I'm good at them. That's my job. So that's fine. It's okay when I do it.
Right. Right.
It's if we need some more numbers, I'll hit you up.
Right. You might as well just take over the whole podcast then.
Yeah, it would make sense. It would probably be much better that way. As a uh, let's do one
Yeah. It's
last
just
little
that people
thing.
would lose much more.
That's true. They would lose a lot more, but it'd be entertaining. 20. You know,
Yeah.
we're about to hit the 26-minute mark. We've bored enough people. Last little thing. What do you think's happening in this test? Win, draw, washed out.
Uh,
What's happening?
I think India's going to win it.
All right, India to win.
Yeah. And that's no biases there. I just think that Kohli looked charged up at the end of the last match. He looked ready to mess shit up.
All right, all right. That's uh, that's all we have time for today.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Links links in the description if you're on YouTube. Um, Links everywhere really to our Patreon and our email address for feedback and comments. Share, like, subscribe. Um, put it on mute and go do something else. So at least we get a full view. And whatever you want to do, however you can support the channel, will be super great. And we'll see you
Yep.
next week for episode 9, which would be the fifth and final test. And depending on who's more smug, you'll probably realize and know who's won or who's lost the test. Azza, thank you very much.
Or you could have just watched the match yourself. But anyway,
That's I mean, who watches
Thanks a lot,
cricket?
Nick.
We only just we play fantasy cricket. We don't watch cricket. That's where it's at. Azza,
That's all we're here for. That's true.
thanks a lot. Azza, have
All
a good one.
right.
Thanks, listeners.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Yeah.